Ethan stood frozen, his heart racing, as the prosecutor's words crushed him. But then, with a shaky breath, he spoke. "She's my aunt." The room went silent. The entire case had just shifted. What really happened between them? The truth was darker than anyone could guess. But let's start from the beginning. The courtroom was heavy with tension, the air thick with unspoken questions and judgments. Ethan Summers, a 17-year-old boy, stood in the witness box, his face a picture of composure, yet his eyes, wide, panicked, betrayed the truth. He was scared. He was innocent, but no one seemed to believe it. His brown hair was neatly combed, his blue eyes darting between the judge and the jury as though searching for someone, anyone, to understand him. The prosecutor, Carla Green, exuded confidence. Her sharp gaze cut through the room like a blade, every word dripping with conviction as she painted Ethan as a heartless criminal. She spoke of a stolen wallet, an elderly woman suffering in a crowded park. But Ethan couldn't even remember being there, certainly not in the way she described. Her argument was seamless, methodical, and yet it felt wrong to him, like a puzzle piece that didn't fit. He stood there, shrinking back with every accusation, his body language screaming his innocence. His defense? A plea to prove that he was not the man they were portraying. But there was more to this, much more. Ethan was caught in a nightmare, the victim of a well-crafted lie. Then James Park, Ethan's defense attorney, rose from his seat, his voice calm yet full of quiet resolve. "Your Honor," he said, "my client's innocence is clear. This is nothing but a web of lies, and I will prove it." His words hung in the air, thick with challenge. The jury watched Ethan with a mixture of doubt and curiosity, their eyes scanning him for some sign of guilt. A few exchanged glances, unsure of what to believe. Ethan didn't have an answer to their unspoken question. He didn't have an explanation for why he had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But there was something more, something deeper lurking beneath the surface of this case. The pieces didn't fit, but Ethan had no idea what the real puzzle looked like yet. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted dramatically as Ethan's attorney, James Park, began his defense. There was a quiet murmur among the spectators. Something had changed. James stood tall, his voice unwavering as he revealed a critical piece of evidence. It was an alibi that would shake the case to its core. Ethan had not been in the park when the robbery took place. Instead, he had been at the hospital, sitting beside his mother during her chemotherapy session. The room fell silent, the weight of the revelation settling over everyone. Ethan felt a fleeting sense of hope, but it was quickly replaced by the harsh realization that this new information wasn't enough to erase the suspicion that still clouded his every move. The prosecutor, Carla Green, was stunned for a moment, her face betraying disbelief. She had not prepared for this. But Carla wasn't one to back down easily. She recovered swiftly, her voice sharp with skepticism. "How convenient," she spat, her eyes narrowing. "The mother's illness is a poor excuse to cover up his crime. You have no proof of his whereabouts, except for his word." Her words cut through the room like a blade, driving doubt into the hearts of those who had dared to believe in Ethan's innocence. The tension in the courtroom surged. Every eye was now trained on Ethan, each spectator questioning his story, wondering if this was all a carefully constructed lie. And Carla wasn't finished. She leaned forward, her gaze icy as she began her next line of attack. "What do we know about this boy?" she asked, her tone dripping with suspicion. "His past? His friends? What is he hiding?" The questions lingered in the air, each one a weight that pressed down harder on Ethan's chest. His heart pounded in his ears, the sound of his own blood rushing in his head. His every movement was under scrutiny now. The prosecutor's words were like a net closing around him, tightening with every passing second. He had no answers for the questions that haunted him, and as Carla's accusations mounted, Ethan knew there was only one thing left to do: survive the storm that was coming. The tension in the courtroom had reached its peak. Every eye was fixed on Ethan, his future hanging in the balance. Just when it seemed like the trial was spiraling toward an inevitable guilty verdict, Ethan did the unthinkable. He spoke up. "I didn't do it," he said, his voice shaky yet unwavering. The words hung in the air, raw and vulnerable. It was the first time Ethan had spoken out with such conviction since the trial began. "I know it's hard to believe," he continued, his gaze flickering between the jury and the judge. "But I swear I was at the hospital." His voice cracked, and for a moment the room was still, as if time had frozen. His words, heavy with the weight of his grief and frustration, echoed in the silence. But then something shifted. Ethan's voice softened, gaining a quiet but undeniable strength. "I know the truth about what happened. The woman, she's my aunt." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. The revelation hit like a thunderclap, leaving everyone stunned. The prosecutor, Carla Green, who had worn a smug smile throughout the trial, faltered. Her confident facade cracked as the room processed what Ethan had just revealed. Ethan's aunt, his accuser, wasn't just a victim. She was family. And with that revelation, everything changed. The room was alive with whispers, the gravity of Ethan's words sinking in. The prosecutor's attempt to maintain control faltered. Carla struggled to regain her composure, but the scales had already started tipping. Ethan's defense attorney, James Park, visibly shaken but quick to seize the opportunity, stood tall. "So this was no random act of theft," he said, his voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. "This was a personal vendetta, one driven by betrayal." The courtroom buzzed with the new, electrifying knowledge. The atmosphere was charged with the weight of this new twist, leaving everyone questioning everything they thought they knew. Carla Green tried to regain her ground, but Ethan's words had already planted a seed of doubt, one that would be hard to erase. As the judge deliberated, the jury sat in stunned silence. Ethan had exposed the root of the lies, the conspiracy that had shaped his fate. The truth had been laid bare, but the damage had been done. Carla had tried to ruin Ethan's life with a false narrative, using him as a scapegoat. But the cracks were now visible, and the jury could no longer deny the truth. The judge returned, and the courtroom awaited the verdict. "Not guilty." The words rang out, and Ethan felt as though the weight of the world had been lifted from his shoulders. The emotional relief was overwhelming. His attorney patted him on the back as the courtroom erupted in murmurs. Though Ethan was free, the trauma of the trial lingered. He had been wrongly accused, but his fight for truth had come at a heavy cost. Yet, despite the scars left by this battle, the boy had prevailed. The courtroom had witnessed a powerful transformation, from a helpless defendant to a young man who had fought back against a web of lies.